Hello, and welcome to Financial Health. Happy that you can be here, and hoping that you can hear me, and that you can see me. All right, so far so good. We are waiting for a couple of our students to show up right now. This is going to be a big night with handouts and all kinds of fun stuff to go over together. Maybe I will grab a stool. Let's see here. Well, it is 6:01, and we are still missing 2 people, but we're going to go ahead and get started. I can see a bunch of people coming down to get into the church right now, so I'm assuming they will be coming shortly. All right. Well, just to give a quick recap of last week, where we spent some time with Jim. Jim was nice enough to share with us based on his experience and some material that he actually shared with a church that he belonged to about a decade ago. And it was called Weathering the Storm. Weathering the Storm. And so what we talked about was preparing our financial storm shelter, right? Preparing our financial storm shelter. And he said that we were to ask the Lord for 3 things. 3 things, right? First was that he would calm our spirit, because we know that there's a lot going on in the world right now around us that, can definitely make us feel anything but calm, right? There's just so many things going on out there that we hear day in and day out that can rattle our cages for sure. So we need to pray and ask the Lord for a calm spirit. We need to ask him for clarity, right? Because there are a lot of voices out there speaking into these things, and so we really need clarity. We need to ask him for clarity in these areas. And we need to especially ask him to have a tender and teachable spirit. That we would be sensitive to the Spirit's leading and guiding. So these are 3 areas that I feel like I would love to take some time right now and pray for each one of us How about if we bow our heads and just seek the Lord's help this evening together? Father, I do come to you because we need you. We need your help. Lord, we fall so short in so many areas that, Lord, we just cry out to you to be the one, by the mighty working of your Spirit who indwells us, that you would illuminate truth to us. Help us to be led and guided by you. Lord, there are so many other voices that speak into our lives day in and day out. So, Lord, we pray that you would open the eyes of our heart to hear from you, that you would be the one to show us truth and to empower us to be able to live a life worthy of our calling, and that we would honor you with all that we think, say, and do. Father, we do ask for clarity. We ask you to give us a tender and teachable spirit, and we trust that you will be faithful to us tonight and every day hereafter. And we pray all this in Jesus' name. Amen. Okay, here come my star pupils. I have you guys set up over here, if that's okay, on the end. And those handouts are for you. What I'm doing right now is just doing a brief overview from last week to kind of get us caught up, and then we'll get started in with the handouts. So 3 things we just prayed for was a calm spirit, a clear eye, and a tender, teachable spirit. And something that we didn't really talk a lot about last week with Jim, but I thought that we should at least touch on it a little bit, is recognizing our limitations. Now, there are some things that obviously we can control, but there are many things that are out of our control, right? And so for us, we need to think on the things that are in our control, the things that we are responsible for and actually can, in fact, have some kind of bearing and leading in. But ultimately, and I put this verse down here because I think it's a key verse in Colossians 1:15 through 17. Ultimately, we need to trust the Lord. Why? Well, he's sovereign for one, but the scriptures tell us that he's actually the one who holds all things together, right? He is the one who holds all things together. And I'm just going to go ahead and turn to Colossians and read that, because I think it is important for us to be reminded of this. Now, bear with me here because I didn't mark it. It is Colossians 1:15 through 17. And here's what we see from the Apostle Paul here in Colossians 1:15 through 17. He says, "He is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn over all creation. For by him all things were created, things in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or powers or rulers or authorities. All things were created by him and for him. He is before all things, and in him all things hold together." Again, I love that passage. So we need to keep that in the forefront of our minds as we're spending time together. And we need to check ourselves, right? We check ourselves and ask these questions. The first one is, are you living beyond your means? Are you living beyond your means? I mean, it's a simple question. I think it kind of gets right to the heart. You have to ask yourself, and honestly ask yourself, how am I doing here? Do I have a tendency of possibly living outside of my means, that in which God has given me to live? And if so, do you have to lower your standard of living? And what does that look like for you? I know I've talked to some people who say, man, if I lower my standard of living anymore, I'm going to be, pretty harsh and some serious hardship coming up here. So, but for some of us, I think it's a real, reasonable question to wrestle with. How are we doing in these areas? Am I living beyond my means? And if so, what changes can I make in order to lower that standard of living to match more up with what God has actually given me to live on? And are your expectations higher than what your finances can deliver? And I know the desires of our heart, right? That's really where it begins. Those things that we desire, and then we actually start living out. It's born in the heart, but then we start working it out from there, and then we start developing a plan. And oh man, how can I get that? And then from the plan, we actually act on it, and we sign the papers, right? The loan officer shakes our hand and he says, "Thank you very much." And we're in a 5 or 7 year loan for that car that we really, really loved, and we're locked in to it. So vehicles in this day and age, for most of us, are a necessity. We have to have them, but they also, they're making nicer and nicer cars every day, and I know I am a car lover myself, and I find myself falling into this temptation where, man, I'd love to have these really nice automobiles, but they come with a hefty price tag as well. So are your expectations higher than what your finances can deliver? Another question to consider. And Jim did walk us through this last week. Communicate with your family. Speak frankly and honestly with them about your financial situation and your financial plan, what you plan to do in order to either get out of the debt or continue along the same lines that you are to stay out of debt. Share how you intend to deal with the economic turmoil and uncertainty that is coming. And Jim did walk us through that really well last week. And then I spent some time alongside Jim last week talking about the importance of seeking financial advice or counsel from those who know a lot more about these things than we do, which would be wise to do. Don't trust everything that you hear about the economy on TV, newspapers, or online. I don't think I have to hammer on that point. That goes without saying, because we know we do not believe the lie that everything that you see online is true. Be diligent to receive this information from as many reliable sources as possible, right? As many as possible. So, talk to Jim and I. Yeah, we're hopefully reliable, but don't stop with us, Continue to find other people. I can give you some people that I know that I trust, and Jim, I'm sure, can as well. But continue to seek the counsel of many, right? And Jim talked about getting our financial house in order, and we need to do that now. It needs to be something that we begin. And do not take on any new unnecessary debt. This is something that we didn't really talk about a whole lot last week, but I think it's important that we do. Look at where you're at. And if your goal is to become debt-free, then the first thing you want to do is guard against taking on any unnecessary debt. Okay? And pay off those high-interest loans. We're going to speak a little bit about this tonight, about the Snowball Strategy of paying off debt, specifically credit card debt. And so those high-interest credit card debts, man, we want to attack those, and we want to get those paid off, because those are killing us. And then once our debt is paid down or paid off, we can actually start saving money, right? And that's really what we're looking to do. We want to start saving money so that we can put some money in our emergency fund, and then eventually build that emergency fund up so that we have more in there. So start saving money. Consider working overtime or getting a second job. I don't know. This is obviously, if you find yourself in that situation where your debt to income ratio is upside down and you need to have more coming in than what's going out, then this is an option for you to get that second job or work some overtime in order to help yourself get more lined up. And then we continue with getting our financial house in order. We talked about this last week, develop a budget. I'm just curious, how many of you here started developing your budget this week since last time we met? No? That's all right. And that's fine, because actually the handouts that I have today are going to help us to move that a little bit further along. But I was just curious if you had some time to look at that and start looking at some of your allocations at least and see where your money is going. But that's fine, because today we're going to spend time doing that, or at least looking at how to do that. All right. Give to the church and others in need. I know this is going to stay in the forefront of my teaching time. We're going to be looking a lot at this and making sure that we're prioritizing God's kingdom purposes above ours, right? So giving to the church and others in need is important to keep in mind. And then he did go through and walk through these, so I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time here. Look at your electricity usage, how you can possibly get help from energy providers with that. Check your eligibility for heating assistance. Cut back on your monthly cable bill. That was another one we looked at. Are you a careful grocery shopper, right? Are you a careful clothes shopper? Are you receiving the best insurance rates? Look at that. Check with your insurance provider, and you can shop around for rates and see if you can do better. And then Jim really took us on a good road here. He did focus a lot on keeping our vehicle in good mechanical condition and the importance of that and why that is important. He even said drive slower, right? And you hear this. You know, the slower you drive, if you drive reasonable, you will save gas over the long haul. Cut back on Christmas spending. Oh, don't let the kids hear this one, right? But cut back on Christmas spending. I mean, some of us can go really kind of crazy with our spending around this time of the year. So let's keep that to a minimal. Take shorter vacations. That's something, or less expensive vacations. And check your long-term savings to be sure that they are in a safe financial vehicle. And again, I took some time to look at those areas of investing a little bit, but we will look at that more in the upcoming lessons. Stay healthy. We eat properly, we exercise regularly, and we get enough sleep. In order to do that, those three things are important. And then developing a budget. We talked about what a budget is, that a budget, it is a well thought out spending plan. It is tailored to your particular situation, and it helps you to know what you can and cannot afford. And that is it. That pretty much sums up what we talked about last week with Jim. And now we're going to spend the rest of our time together. First of all, I'm going to see if you guys have any questions about what we covered last week. I know the three of you were not able to be here, so I'm just curious. And I need to check in with you afterwards to see how you're making out. I'm curious about that. But I'm just wondering, do you guys have any questions? I know you joined us online last week, and how did that go for you, being at home and joining us there? I mean, besides not being able to hear us some of the time, but yep. Yeah, and that's always an option. I'll keep my phone with me. You can reach out by text and let us know what you're thinking. If you have any questions, we'll try to address them in real time. But yeah, you guys worked a little bit ahead, you said earlier before we started class. I'm just wondering, what was that like for you to sit down and start working through your budget a little bit. I'll give this to you if you just want to share a little bit about what that was like for you, and if you have any thoughts or questions so far on what that was like.
We've had a budget for a long time, but we basically went through and retweaked it and went back and looked at what our expenses were. Went back to the checkbook and got some more solid numbers of what we've been spending, and then trying to tweak it and go, okay, yeah, we can cut back here. Well, nope, we need a little bit more on this side of the house. Other than that, I mean, it took us, I don't know, maybe it took us, maybe a half hour, 45 minutes to sit and just go through it and put it together. Yeah.
That we didn't think about. And then we had a talk about some of the things that that like I use, but I use them for work, and I also use them for a card ministry. So it's like, okay, so do we cut these out, or are these necessary?
Okay. So Lisa just shared something that's really good for us to camp out on here a little bit. So they started working on their budget. They looked at the allocations, and she even admitted that there were some areas that they missed, right? And that's fine, because that's why we're here. We're going to be going through that today in more detail. But she mentioned that there is it a side job or is it a hobby that you're talking about? Okay. Mm-hmm. Okay. Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, that's something. Okay, so what Lisa's sharing is that she actually is going to have some business expenses because she's paying for these things out of her own money for like an app that she's using for work. So this is where having a personal accountant is actually really helpful, because you can take those expenses to them and let them know about them. And when they do your taxes, they can include that in with the whole formula that they end up doing for your taxes. I pay somebody to do my taxes. I know that there are a lot of people out there who are like, I'm not going to pay somebody $150 to do what I can do at home, right? I can spend $30 at Walmart, get the software package or whatever, and do it myself. I just have to tell you, I did that. I did that for a good part of my 20s and basically my 20s. Because when I got to about 30, I'm like, I'm done with this. Like, that's like the best $150 I spend a year. I mean, I am glad to write that check out every year to my accountant, because I give them a whole folder full of stuff that Kathy and I have collected over the year. And I do my due diligence to make sure that I have everything that I need, and that in and of itself is a big burden on my shoulders. I take care of that. And receipts and what have you, and I do all that, and that is enough for me to have to carry. I just can't cross the finish line with it. I'm sorry, that's just me personally, but I am happy to give all of that to my accountant, and he is very thorough and responsible in how he carries that out for us. So that's completely up to you guys, obviously, if you want to do that or not. But make sure that you're claiming what you can claim as far as business expenses and things like that, and And make sure that that's going down in your budget, right? Because that's money that's coming out. And if you're not making an allocation for that, then your budget's not going to work itself out right. So that's just an area, that you noticed. Yeah, yeah. Well, medical, we're going to get there. Medical stuff is one of those unknowns. There's a big question mark there because nobody knows what's going to be coming up around the corner for our health, right? So what do? Well, we'll talk about that more specifically when we get there. But my personal opinion is be prepared. I mean, put some money aside for the unknown, and that's why we have an emergency fund, right? So, but don't only count on your emergency fund. You need to have a special allocation for healthcare, right? How many of you have an HSA, a health savings account through your employer? Anybody have one of those? Okay. They are really, really nice. They're a great vehicle to use if you ever have the opportunity to be a part of an HSA. Make sure you take advantage of that because it's something that is extremely helpful to have. But if you don't have one of those, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on an HSA, but just to know that they are a good thing if you have the opportunity to use one. All right. Thank you guys for sharing what that was like for you. So just like to help us know a little bit where you're at now in the process of building your budget. So you said you missed a couple areas that you feel like you need to fill in, which is fine. But how did it make you feel when you got to the end of that and you did what you did do? Like, give us an idea of kind of where you're at now. Has that affected you in any way? Okay. Uh-huh. Yeah. Right. Right. Well, see, that's what we want to guard against. Exactly. Yeah, and so what Lisa shared is really valuable. She's like, well, what happens if one of my pets gets sick and I don't have an allocation for a pet fund, let's say, for a vet bill or something like that? That's where, again, an emergency fund is fine, but I always have like a miscellaneous allocation for things like that, and that kind of is like the catch-all. And so you'll want to have a miscellaneous allocation so that when something unexpected comes up that's really kind of random that you haven't thought about, you can, say, oh, wait a minute, I've been putting $25 a week in my miscellaneous fund, and now 6 months later, my dog jumped off the porch and tore his ACL, right? Has to get surgery done, whatever. You'll have something to fall back on for something like that. So miscellaneous fund is a good thing to have. So I think what you'll notice, not only you guys, but the rest of us as we continue to work through the budget and what it looks like to develop this, is it's going to bring you satisfaction on a couple different levels. Satisfaction in the sense that you're doing the hard work to be a good steward of what God's given you. And there's satisfaction in that, right? You're not just kind of out there floating around, but you are being diligent and doing your due diligence to take every cent that the Lord has provided for you, and you are now putting that to work, right? You're putting it to work. And that's what we want to do. We want to make sure that we are being responsible with what God's given us, and that we are able to capitalize to the best of our ability with everything that He's given us, right? So that's what we want to do, and that's our game. That's our goal. And what's really cool is over the course of 6 months to a year down the road, after you've got this all figured out and you're working it, and you're seeing it work for you, it brings great delight, because you're not feeling that stress and strain financially that you maybe once did when you were surprised by things that came up, because now you've planned your finances. And instead of being in bondage to your finances are under your control, right? And that's the way it should be. We should never be enslaved to a lender. We should never be enslaved to any economy, but we need to be the ones who are in control of that and and ruling that, not allowing it to rule us. All right. Well, let's turn over to the first page, personal financial statement. And let's take a look at this. Let's take a look at this. All right. So what I thought we would do is we're going to walk through some of these sheets, because I think it's going to be really helpful for when you go home and actually do it, to have a really good understanding of what this looks like. So the first heading is assets at the top, right? Assets. And you'll see a list, and it says cash on hand, checking account. And then there's a line for you to put that. So what you're going to do is you're going to take this home, and you're going to get your checkbook out. Or if you do online banking, you're going to pull up your online account, and you're going to look at that. You're going to say, okay, what's in our checking account right now? Write that number down on that line. What's in our savings account? Write that down on the line. And you're going to go down through that list, stocks and bonds, whatever you have right now, and whatever that value is, you want to put that down on that particular line. Your cash value on any whole life insurance policies that you may have. Cash value is only available to those who have a whole life insurance policy, because term insurance policies don't have cash value, right? So if you have a whole life policy, you can look that up, or you can contact your life insurance provider. They should send you a statement out every year with that information. You should get a statement every year on that. So if you have your statement, just go back to your most recent statement and put that number in there. That'll be close enough. Any valuable coins. Now, they're not talking about your loose change necessarily that's laying around, but they're talking about, hey, you might have some really valuable coins that are worth something that you got priced out, and instead of cashing them in, you decided, you know what, I'm going to keep these for when I need them. So put that down. Your home value, what you believe your home is actually worth. And here's how you figure that out. And you're shaking your head like, I have no idea, right? Yeah, and that's reasonable. You may not. How long have you lived in your home? 50 years. There you have it. That's not something that you think about often, right? When you're in your home that long. But here's how I would recommend that you go about finding this out. For those of you who own your own home, what I would do is I would do my own comp. It's called a comp. So what you want to do is, if you have access to the internet, and if you don't, then you'll want to try to find a realtor to help you with this. But if you have access to the internet, you would go to realtor.com or someplace like that, and you would look at similar homes in your area and what they are now, hopefully pending ones that are pending. In other words, they're under contract, because you can ask anything for your house, right? But it has to be within a reasonable amount for someone to actually sign the papers and go under contract. So for those houses that are pending, I would look at the price on there. And let's say you have a 3-bedroom, 2-bath home that's 1,600 square feet. You found a home online that's pretty similar to that, and it just sold for $300,000 on a 1-acre lot. Okay, so you'll take that $300,000. Again, this is ballpark. You'll take that $300,000, and you will then subtract whatever you owe on the home, and that would give you what your home is actually the net value of your home. Does that make sense? Okay. If you don't owe anything on your home, then that $300,000 is your net. All right. Okay. So moving on from your home, any other real estate. I mean, maybe you have a vacation home, and that needs to be included with this as well. Any other real estate. Maybe you have, a cabin on 25 acres that you like to go to and hunt on. That's valuable. Make sure that you put that same thing. How am I going to figure out the value? Do what I just explained with your home. Go to, there's a website called Land and Farms. They deal a lot with that kind of recreational property type stuff. Look up recreational property, get the value for your raw land, and go from there. Okay. Mortgages, notes receivable. So here, okay, so mortgages and notes receivable. What they're saying here is basically what you owe on your home. Okay. Now, because I didn't look ahead, or I did look ahead and didn't remember this allocation, I have to step back now to the one where the home is. So what you would do is put the actual home value there, right? And then put your mortgages, your mortgage and notes receivable down here. So we can look at that in more detail together, because I want to make sure that I understand myself exactly what they're saying there. Yeah. Because, no, see, we don't, it's not, it's because this is assets. This would not be what you owe on your mortgage. This, right. This is if you are actually, if you are holding a mortgage and you are renting, and you are a renter, that's what's throwing me off, because I know this would not be what you owe on your mortgage since we're talking about assets. So this would be for those of you who own another property and you are receiving payment on that. So go back to the home and do exactly what I told you to do before with that in order to get your assets. And then the business valuation. Business valuation. This would be for those of you who own a business, and I am not I'm not a business owner, so I'm not really educated on how to figure out the value of your business. You would need to talk to somebody who would be able to help you with that. Right, right. Okay. Here, speak into this. So the guys at home can hear you.
It has a lot to do with the same as your home. I used to own my own construction company. The evaluation would be all the equipment that I owned. I mean, right down to a hammer, honestly, because all of that, when I closed up shop, everything sold and I made some money. So, and again, same thing for like mortgages. If I owned or if I owed any loans or anything like that, that would come off, which I didn't. I owned everything straight up. Same thing for insurance and all of that. It's all things that would be coming out of the bottom line. All of that adds up to what the total worth of the company would be. Basically, if I was to just, here, I'm going to give it to Keith, and, how much are you going to, this is what it's worth, how much are you going to pay me, so.
No, I appreciate that. So really look at it as if, just like you would your home, you would do the same thing with your business in order to figure out what your assets are with that. Automobiles, okay? again, this automobiles, it's like you lose. The second you drive it off the lot, it's already depreciated. Again, you'd have to do a comp, just like you did on your house. Go online, go to Kelley Blue Book is another option. You know, that's another pretty reliable resource. You can go on there, punch in all the data that they ask for. It'll give you Blue Book value. That'll be around a ballpark figure based on, you know, what the current value is on that. Okay, the business. Going back to the business.
Unlike my case, because I was just closing up shop, so selling everything out, for a business evaluation too, if your business was, like if you are passing it on to somebody and the business is staying open, you do have to figure in the amount of work that you did. I believe it was at least 2 years in the past. And if anything you have planned, like again, as a contractor, if you had any upcoming projects and if you had a contract with them. So basically, let's just say $1 million worth of work I did each year, the last 2 years, that would fall into your evaluation for your valuation. Same thing if I'm handing any projects over. Again, it helps to estimate if the business is growing or falling. You know, to give the buyer an idea if it's going to be worth anything more or less. So.
Yeah. No, that makes really good sense. Okay, so automobiles. You'll figure out what your value is. Again, if you owe on that vehicle, you have to subtract, obviously, what you owe from the value, and you will get your assets. Furniture, jewelry, other personal property. Again, this is kind of one of those things where, for some of us, I mean, furniture can be invaluable. Like my wife, she has a kitchen table and chairs, and to her, it's worth $1 million because it belonged to her grandmother, right? So there are those particular items that you can't put a price on, but there are those things that if you had to sell them, right, you could sell them. And what would they actually be worth if you were to put them on, let's say, Facebook Marketplace? And what's a reasonable amount that you could get for that 32-inch flat screen HD TV or whatever, you know where I'm going. So again, you can do all of these fine-tuned things. Jewelry, again, is another one. And other personal property. So basically what we're doing here is we're trying to get as close as we can to our total assets. You'll want to take a look at your pension and your retirement, if you have one of those, and get that information as well. And any other assets that you may have. Again, we did look at stocks and bonds. Maybe you have other investment vehicles out there, IRAs, Roths, traditional IRAs, things like that. You'll want to get those, add them up, and put them there as well under other assets. So basically at the bottom, you will total all of those line items up, and you'll get your total assets. Right? Does that make sense? Any questions on that section? All right. Now we go on to the not so fun line items. These are our liabilities. And these are liabilities that we're going to figure out exactly what we currently owe on each one of these line items. So the first one is credit card debt. And this one is extremely important that we get right. So again, if you do a lot of these things online, you'll want to go online, pull up your account, find out exactly where you are on each one of your credit card debts. And there's actually, we're going to look at a sheet in just a little bit that's going to help us to do this. So don't get overwhelmed by this line item because there's a whole sheet on how to do this. All right, so I'm going to just kind of breeze through this one and go on to the automobile loans. So again, automobile loans, your liabilities, what you owe on that vehicle. Home mortgages, personal debt to relatives, business loans, educational loans, medical, other past due bills, life insurance loans, bank loans, other debts and loans. Now, I'm going to backtrack here under the assets section, because you can do like what I do is I do a lot of this on the front end as I go in order to get my assets. And so I would not necessarily, because I don't have any credit card debt, I don't have any automobile loans or mortgage, a lot of these things don't apply to me. So what I did was shorthand, all right? So what I did was I figured out under my assets right away by subtracting what I owed in order to get my assets correct on the front end. That saved me this step. For those who have these other things, then I would backtrack and say, just do your assets, which is under the assets section, and then just do your liabilities, because then you will find your net worth at the bottom by minusing the liabilities from your assets. Does that make sense? I hope I didn't make that more complicated than it needed to be. But I was kind of being selfish in the way that I did that, because I just didn't go through the long hand of it. I did the shorthand. So do this however is going to work best for you. There's, you know what I mean? There's more than one way to do this. So make it work best for you. That's what we want to find out, and how that's going to work for you. So under liabilities, you would then figure out your credit card debt, your total amount of credit card debt, stick that on that line, automobile loans, mortgages, personal debt to relatives or anybody that you may owe money to that, you know, we're going to talk about a scripture in particular that says it is good and necessary to pay back debt, right? It's biblical to do that. So we want to make sure that we honor the Lord by paying back our debts. Any business loans, educational loans, medical, past due bills, life insurance loans. And when they say life insurance loans, that goes back to those of you who have a whole life insurance policy and you've borrowed against the cash value in that policy. And so in order to receive your full life insurance benefit, you actually need to pay that cash value back, okay? It's not, I mean, if you don't pay it back, they're just going to take it off the top, and your beneficiary is not going to get that full amount. So if you want your beneficiary to get the full amount of your life insurance policy, be sure that you pay back that cash value loan that you took out. And of course, any bank loans that you may have, other debts and loans. So, any questions on liabilities and assets? So when you get to the bottom, you'll total your liabilities up, and then your net worth is your total assets minus your total liabilities. And then you'd write that down on that line. Okay? That's our personal financial statement. And again, this can look a whole, like if Jim was here right now, right? If Jim was here right now, he would look at this and he would scoff at these line items, because I can almost assure you that he has 3 or 4 pages of line items like this. He's really particular about his budget. So he breaks it down even more, and you can do that. You don't have to use just these line items. So make this work for you. This is something that is for your benefit. And so if you want to add, something that I personally would add that is on my budget is personal money. And I think Jim touched on this a little bit last week. Personal money, right? We don't want to be so crazy with this that we don't give ourselves an allowance. We need to give ourselves an allowance. So give yourself whatever makes sense for you within reason, $30, $50 a week maybe, somewhere in there. That's being very generous. I mean, 20 bucks a week, 15, okay. That's reasonable. I can go with 15. I'm good with that. But the thing is, what's nice is you don't have to spend that every week. That just continues to roll over week in and week out. And then a couple months down the road, when you see the sale on something that has really caught your eye, right, that you would really like to have, by all means, if you have the money in there saved up, buy it. Get that thing, right? Get that thing. So that's something I would definitely add in your line items there is an allocation for, just some personal money, an allowance, a personal allowance. Okay, let's move on to our variable expenses. That's the next sheet. Variable expenses. And this is a sample at the top, right? So the first line is vacation. Yeah, right. What's that? What's that? I hear you. Yeah, we don't all have the luxury to be able to afford a vacation every year. But here's the thing, and I'm just going to speak to this because I think it is wise and good. There's things that we can do that cost little to no money, and we can still feel like we've had a break, right? We have stepped outside of our normal everyday routine, and we've got a reprieve. We've taken some time to refresh and be renewed. That's important. Okay, we can't take that for granted. I think it is absolutely necessary that we do that. And I think it would be wise and good for us to take some time and think about what that might look like for us. Make that a part of your assignment. If you don't feel like you can take a vacation because your finances do not support that, then we need to help each other figure out ways that we can take that time. If it's a week, and say, you know what, for a week, Jay and Lisa, we have a spare bedroom in our house. We would love to serve you for that week. Just check out, come to our house for a week. We will cook and prepare meals for you for that week. And we will serve you for that week because we love you and we know that it's important that you get away and take some time for your marriage and take some time for you to have with the Lord that's uninterrupted time. And so we can help one another with these things. It's a way of serving one another in love. I would love to do that. I know Kathy would too, so I'm serious about that. But we can put our heads together and we can find inexpensive or maybe a way of not spending any money at all, which would be awesome. But we can still have that time. Okay, the next line item is a dentist. I try to stay away from them, but you know how it is. Go to the dentist, even when you don't want to. It'll save you money in the long run. Keep up with your teeth. But figure out approximately what it would cost you in a year to go to the dentist. And how do you do that? Well, I don't know if you're like me, but I save everything. I save all of my receipts. I keep them in a folder. I have medical folder, this, that, and the other thing. I'll go back and over the course of a year figure out what's my average, my yearly average. And once you find your yearly average, put that down on this particular line. Same with your doctor. Again, from year to year, this is going to change. We just don't know what's around the corner for our health. But perfect world is put aside enough, figure it out. And then your automobile, your yearly costs. Now, here's one that gets a little bit gray, if you will, a little gray area under automobile, the way they have this here. You can do automobile and just say, okay, this is just like if I were to have a loan on my car. And then what I would do is put down automobile loan, because I'm looking down the line here and they don't have it spelled out. But then what I would do under 11 and 12 is I would put down automobile fuel, right? Make sure that you're being concrete and specific with your allocations or you're going to miss something. Or if you want to lump it all together, I don't suggest doing. I think being as specific as possible is your best bet. So I would just put down automobile and write down loan behind it, and then do fuel costs for your automobile, and then do maintenance cost. Make that a whole nother line item, maintenance. And under maintenance, I always include, well, you know every year you're going to have the inspection because you live in Pennsylvania. And depending on what county you have, you're also, in addition to your regular state inspection, you're going to have what's called emissions, right? And that's not cheap either. So if you have to add up what your state inspection plus your emissions is and add that to your yearly automobile maintenance, let's just put it under maintenance expenses because it's something that would fall in there. Right? Oil changes, right? That would go under maintenance. If you pay to have your oil changed, or if you don't, like me, I change my own oil. But just going to Walmart for 5 quarts of oil and an oil filter is costing me $33, somewhere around there. So if you're spending that plus having someone change it for you, I'm sure they're charging you $25, $30. You're looking at $70, $75 for an oil change, possibly every time around there. I don't know because I haven't paid for an oil change in years, but I'm sure it's not cheap. So all of those things add up. So why are we taking the time to unpack this so much? Well, it's because it's important. It's important to know where our money's going. So you really have to think deeply about these little line items so that we don't miss something, right? So automobile covers a kind of a broad gamut of things. Make sure that you're specific with that. All right, so life insurance, health insurance, auto insurance. These are all things that are pretty written in stone. The life insurance, unless it's term life insurance, that can change your cost. But whole life insurance, you're locked in at that premium, and that should not change for the life of the policy. So you can actually figure that out and be really spot on with that. Your health insurance is going to change because your employer, every time that contract's up, which is usually yearly, they're out there looking for a cheaper plan. I guarantee it. They're going to be shopping around. And so that's going to change from year to year. So make sure that when your health insurance policy re-ups, that you're on board with, okay, well, what's this costing me? What's going to be my out-of-pocket expense, right? And auto insurance, that should stay unless, you have some problems there with accidents or points against you. That can raise your auto insurance. But now, actually, Erie this year went up, and they went up substantially. For the first time since I've been like 16 years old that I can remember. I've had them all my life since I've been driving, and they went up. It was like an extra $110 a year. I was shocked to see that. But I'm like, okay, I've been with them for this long. They've been good to me. They've covered any problems I've had. $110 a year after all these years. It hurt. When I first got it and I saw it, I was like, but I'm over it. And I'm like, okay, you know what? It's a business and they have to survive too. I get it. But make sure that you're keeping an eye on that because once in a while you can get a rate increase. Home insurance, keep an eye on that. That should be locked in pretty well. Clothing. I don't know what to say to this one. Clothing it's just interesting how the Lord provides for me in that way. Like, I'll come in on any random day of the week here at church, and there'll be a stack of clothing back on this table in the back here, and a sign that says free. And it's like the Lord knows exactly when I need a new pair of jeans. I'll go back there, and sure enough, 34, 34. Hey, that works for me. I can sometimes do a 32, 34, but it's not as comfortable, that's for sure. But with all that to say, don't be ashamed to go to Goodwill and go to places like Salvation Army, to go and come in here when someone's generous enough to bring clothing in. And I've received some really nice clothing, nicer than what I would spend money to buy for sure. And they were beautiful. I mean, great items. They hang in my closet right now that I appreciate. And Goodwill, same thing. We've found some amazing deals there, shoes and clothing. So that's just me. I try to stay away from designer stuff and even new stuff if I can. So investments is next. Estimated yearly costs. That, again, is going to depend on your particular situation and if, A, you're investing, and B, if you're on a regular giving kind of month to month, then you'll be able to figure that out pretty easily. I don't really know what else to say other than if you're kind of giving when you can, just randomly. I would suggest, if it's random and it's not consistent, I would suggest continuing to put that money in your account that you have set aside for emergencies, right? Your emergency fund, until you get that built up. And we're going to talk about all this later on. I'm kind of getting ahead of myself, but because we're in this right now, I'm going to talk about it. Make sure that you have your emergency fund where you want it, right? And that means at least 3 to 6 months of your monthly expenses, okay? And preferably 6 months if you can. But again, we're going to get there, and that seems really overwhelming to us right now because we're looking at this on the very front end of our budget. But halfway into this, you're going to see that that's a lot more realistic than what you think. It can happen, and it does happen. And when it happens pretty quick. Like, you'd be shocked how fast, once you become debt-free, how fast you can save that emergency fund. Like, it's awesome. And then how fast you can start pumping money away in your investments because now you have that emergency fund sitting there. It's exciting. I'm really excited for you guys to be able to experience that. All right. That's the sample. Does anybody have any thoughts or questions on that top section? Because it's 7 now. I would love to take like a 10 or 15-minute break because 2 hours is a long time to sit, especially listening to me. So, yes, Lisa. Right. So it is not. It is not under investments. So it's coming. It's coming. It's right around the corner. And you're going to see that as we move forward here in the latter half of our time together tonight. Because this is a sample, for whatever reason, they chose not to have it in here. But when we actually get to the next couple pages, you're going to see that this is more spelled out. And our estimated spending plan, a couple pages over, in fact, you're going to see that the tithing and giving is right there in the number 1 spot. If you just look over to your next page under estimated spending plan, at the top left under monthly income, it's tithing and giving is number 1. That's the number 1 allocation. That means we set money aside for that first and foremost, right alongside our taxes, because we know we can't get out of those too. So, all right. Okay, well, does anybody else have any other thoughts or questions on anything we covered so far tonight at all? Okay. We are going to take about a 10-minute break, and we will get back here around 7:15. It's 7:03 now, so that gives us 12 minutes to have some hot tea and some fellowship, and then we'll get back at it. All right. Okay, we are going to get started up here. We got our hot tea, had some good fellowship, and we're going to keep moving because we do have several sheets to cover. Some I'm going to breeze through because I don't think we need to take the time to focus on them, but this one in particular, the variable expenses, we did take some time to really look at that, which is good. And now I need to figure out how I can hold my tea, hold the mic, and flip my paper. Let's see how this works. Toss the mic. All right. Oop. Don't toss the tea. Okay, if you turn your page, you'll see debt list on the back of the sheet we just covered. You can use that if you want. I'm not going to spend any time with you on this right now. But take it home, look at it, see if that would be something that you would want to use. What I really want to spend the majority of our time on is the next page, the estimated spending plan. And that's what you will see at the very top of your sheet, estimated spending plan. Is everybody there? Okay, great. Top left, you'll see monthly income. Monthly income. And then underneath that, gross monthly income. Okay, does everybody understand what that means? Your gross monthly income? All right, good. Yeah, that's what you wish you got in your paycheck. But unfortunately, it is not. All right, so, yeah. Oh, thank you. Thank you, Joe. That was very kind of you. And I will definitely take you up on it because that tea is too hot to drink right now. All right. So working down the list, you'll want to put your salary in there. All right. Now, for those of you who are married, and dual income, right, you want to do this together. This is a community project for you, right? Because God has made you one, and so you will want to take both of your incomes, your salaries, and add them up and put them on that line. Any interest that you have gotten, all I can say is good luck with that. In this day and age, that's something that honestly, unless you have millions of dollars sitting somewhere, it might be worthwhile putting in that line item. But I mean, we get $4 or $5 a year in our high yield interest, high yield savings account. So that goes to show you that we're getting like pennies, not even that. A fraction of a penny on the dollar is quite literally, and then you're paying tax on that, so you're left with basically nothing. So if you want to put interest down in there and it makes you feel better, go for it, but I would probably skip that line item. Dividends is a different story, however. Dividends would be on anything, any stocks, bonds, any financial vehicles that you may have out there that's paying you dividends. You would want to gather that information up and stick it in there. Other income, that would be something like we talked about before. If you have a home that you are renting out, that absolutely needs to go in there. If you have, I don't know, a hobby, maybe you like working with wood and when you have free time, you like to make rocking chairs. That's your thing, right? And once a year you have a yard sale and you put your rocking chair out there that you made. You know, if you know you're going to get $250 from that because it's an awesome rocking chair, and I would spend that for an awesome rocking chair, then put that down there. Be creative about where this money's coming from, and think very good about that. For Karen, it would be, think about how many apples you're going to sell this year and all the extra money you're going to have from your apples, your little apple orchard. She needs a salesman. Oh, all right. So any questions on that top section? That's pretty clear what we're doing. And then as you go down, you'll see a number 1, and tithe and giving. This we talked about right before the break. Why do you think tithe and giving is put in the number 1 spot? I'm curious. Any thoughts on that? Here's a man that knows the scripture. Jay just said, Scripture tells us that we are to bring our first fruits to the Lord, right? Our first fruits to the Lord. So it's a way of honoring God, right? And we're on purpose putting His kingdom purposes first and foremost by doing that. So you'll want to put down whatever your tithe and giving is. And you may say, well, what does that look like? And we're going to talk specifically at length about tithing and giving. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that right now. But what I would say is whatever you're giving right now, figure it out in a month's time, what you give, and stick it in that line. And then taxes, federal, state, and FICA. Right? So, figuring that out monthly, it wouldn't be that difficult. If you get paid bi-weekly, you would just take that amount and multiply it by 2. Normally you get paid twice a week then, or twice a month, I'm sorry. I think there's 1 month, and I think it's actually this month in October that there's a 5th week. And that could throw things where you get an extra paycheck, right? So figure all that out, however it works out, and get your taxes figured out, your monthly taxes figured out, and put it in that line. Now, there's a net spendable income, right? Net spendable income line right underneath that. Someone figure out how we get our net spendable income. Any thoughts? What? Subtract. Well, that's part of it. Right. So you take your gross monthly income, right, and put it in that line, and then your net spendable income will go in the line next to there. All right. And they have a number 3 under housing. For whatever reason, the numbers 1, well, actually 1 and 2 they have there under less. So I'm assuming that's what they were doing when they did that. Okay. Now, number 3 under housing. Again, these are some similar allocations that we looked at earlier, but they did a good job of kind of categorizing these now for us. And so under housing, you have mortgage, rent, based on your particular situation, homeowners insurance or renters insurance, property taxes if you own your home, cable TV, electricity, gas, water, sanitation, telephone, maintenance, internet service, and other. Interesting that they put the telephone under housing. How many people here have a house phone? A landline? Karen. Oh, Karen. Karen is not giving up her landline. But it's funny. You see this. Now, I don't know when Crown Financial put this out. I'm assuming it was probably in the 90s because they've been around some time. But that was the thing. Everyone had a house phone, right? A landline, because that's basically all there was. Because smartphones didn't really come out really come out to like the early 2000s. Oh, yeah. 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 Karen's sharing the good old days of the party line. For those of you who remember the party line, I'm sure you have your own stories with those. But yeah, interesting times. So again, and it's fine if you want to move that and not use it as for what it is, they're under housing, then make another allocation. I don't know what I'm looking over there. You could put it under entertainment or recreation, or you could just leave it there and just put cell phone next to it. However, it doesn't really matter what grouping it's in as long as the allocation exists and you know that you're spending this amount of money for your cell phone and for Karen for both her cell phone and her landline. She would have an extra line there. Oh, okay, nice. Well, good for him. I'm glad he's serving you in that way. So, so you see where I'm going with some of this stuff is a little bit dated, so you have to work around it or work with it, however you want to do it. Maintenance, internet service, and other. And there can be more line items than that. Make this work for you. If you want to add some more to that, then by all means do so. Food, number 4. This is going to vary, right, from home to home. Some families are large, some are small. I think, if I had to guess, I'm not sure what our allocation for food is, but I'm sure that we had to increase it this past year. Everything is going up, 35%. Around there. So maybe we spent $200. That isn't right. Maybe we spent $400 a month for groceries before. We're probably spending at least $500 a month. Somewhere in there. So make sure, and this is another reason why, and I know I mentioned this the first time we got together, but this is another key reason why we have to continue to revisit our budget monthly, regularly, because these things, they change, right? Inflation this past year has changed everything. It's a game changer, right? Our fuel costs have changed things. So if we're still operating on a budget that we made last year, and we haven't revisited it, all these different allocations, all the different ways that our money is being spent, I have a feeling that our budget would not balance out right because things have gone up. And just like that little chart that Jim showed us last week, remember his little drawing? I love that little drawing. It was like a tank with water in it, and he had a valve at the bottom, and water going in and water coming out. Well, that's a perfect example of what would happen if you don't revisit your budget and take a look at each one of these and say, no, whoa. We're only budgeting $75 a week for gas. When did we do this last? And sometimes it's actually really helpful to put somewhere on your budget the last date, the actual date of when you last went through it. That way you don't have to question yourself or question your spouse and say, now when did we last go through all these and figure this out? Well, it was 6 months ago. All right, well, we know that because we wrote it down. So do that and revisit it often. Okay, so we just finished up housing, we finished up food, and then your transportation. You have payments, gas and oil, insurance, license and taxes, maintenance, replacement and other. Replacement. I love that they put this in here because there are not very many that do. I love the fact that they put replacement in here. Replacement is extremely important. Does anybody know what that literally means, replacement? Yeah, yeah. Your car's not going to run forever, right? And there will come a day where you will stop putting money into that vehicle because it just simply is not worth spending any more money on it. I can remember, I've always bought very inexpensive vehicles all my life, really all my life, and tried, early on I had to take car loans out, right? We almost all do because we're just getting started, so we need that help, that jump to get started. So my first 2 or 3 cars, I had to take car loans out, paid them off. But then I got to the point where I could start putting a replacement fund in my budget. And I'll never forget the first time I was able to go buy my first car with cash. Right? It was just this amazing feeling where I didn't have to take a car loan out. And then being able to get ahead of it, if you will, and continue to buy a little bit better car each time so it lasts you a few more years each time, which gives you more time to save up longer for a better car the next time. And do you see where I'm going? It's just you continue to help yourself along as you work it. So the replacement is extremely important. And then other. Can anybody think of any other transportation costs that might have to go in there? Sure. Yeah. Lisa just shared, maybe you want to put like a rent-a-car section there. Put a line item for a rent-a-car because you may need to do that. If your car goes down, it has to go to the garage, you need to get to work. And you have that money there for either an Uber, a cab, a bus, or a rent-a-car. But something's there for that. That's great. I love it. The next one, number 6, is insurance. So you would go down the line, your life insurance, health and dental, disability, and any other insurance that you may have. And you would add those up and stick that next to insurance, number 6. No, because I believe under the housing, they had insurance. Number 2 under mortgage and rent was insurance for your housing. I think what they're saying here is more along the lines of personal insurance. Personal insurance meaning your life insurance, your major medical or dental, any like DI to 65 policies, which is a disability income insurance that you may be paying out of your pocket in case something were to happen to you. Like Joe just shared earlier, he was down and out. He blew his back out. And here's a guy who had a business, right? Now, if he would have had that insurance policy, he could have taken that to his agent and said, look, man, I need to cash in on this thing. And he may have gotten maybe $250, $300 a month. It isn't a lot, but it helps, right, when you're not getting anything. So look at those things and determine if that's something that you feel is necessary for you to have. And then talk to your insurance agent about those things. But that's what they're talking about, those kinds of insurances, Karen. All right? Okay, number 7, debts, not including your house or your automobile. So other debts, okay? Other debts. Number 8, entertainment, recreation. So here's a good list. Eating out, babysitters, activities, trips, vacations, pets. There's a pet allocation. There you go. Yeah, we entertain them, don't we, as their owners, I'm sure. And then any other line item that you can think of that would fall under entertainment or recreation. So, something that I have a friend who loves fireworks. And he'll go and he'll buy $500, $600 worth of fireworks every year because he is like infatuated with these things. And he used to have to drive out of state to get them. Now he doesn't have to do that because they're legal in PA now. But when he did have to drive, not only did he have to factor in the $500 for the actual fireworks, but then the $100 in fuel that it cost him to go to Ohio and back, right? But man, we had one heck of a 4th of July party, right? It was fun. It was fun. But these are things like that you may skip and not think about, that you really have to think, okay, what do I spend money on? And it has to go in that other section. All right, so clothing, savings. There's another one under medical and dental, right? So we have a doctor, dentist, prescriptions, and other. Yeah, prescriptions, right, Karen? Yeah, I know. So figure those things out. There's some gray area. The dentist, I mean, if you get every 6 months you go and you have a co-payment, you kind of know what that is. Doctors, you can kind of figure out. But that's where your emergency fund comes in, and that's also where if you can afford to put a little bit extra in each month, then you know you have it there. Okay. Miscellaneous. Wow, here we go. Toiletries, cosmetics, beauty, barber, laundry cleaners, allowances. There you go, allowances. I'm glad to see that there. Subscriptions, gifts, others. Gifts. That's a great line item, isn't it? To have something set aside for gifts. I love that. There are times where the Lord will lay on Kathy and I's heart, like we'll be talking to somebody and we'll hear something and we'll hear of a need or even something that would be really helpful for that person to have. Maybe it's a book, right, that we know that we've read that this person could really, be helped by. This is one of those times where I'll say to Kathy, hey, you know what? I think this particular book would meet them right where they're at. Do we have money in our gift fund? She said, of course. And we go on Amazon and we buy that person that book and we give it to them. And that comes out of our gift fund. And that's just fun. It's fun to give, right? It's fun to give. So have a gift fund. And then any other miscellaneous line items that you can think of. Investments. You'll put that in there. And then school, childcare. If that, falls under your particular situation, then you would put down any money that you're setting aside or actually paying at that time for tuition, materials, transportation, childcare. For those, who send your children to private schools, this would be a great place for you to put the different costs for that. For those of us who have kids in college, like me, right? Well, it's expensive, right? And we don't, if we can help it, we don't want our kids to start off in a tremendous amount of debt, so we want to help them out if we can. So we set some money aside, right? So that when they are finished, they're not looking at a $100,000 mortgage for their education, which is basically what a lot of these kids are facing, right, when they leave school. So materials, transportation, childcare, all under school childcare. Now, underneath there, you'll see total living expenses. What you do is you go and you add up lines 3 through 14, and you would put that under total living expenses. And then what you do is underneath that, this is how the month turns out for you. This is where the drum roll starts to go, right? You take your net spendable income, you write that in there. That is determined up at the very top left, your gross monthly income minus your tithe giving taxes. Then you subtract your total living expenses. Then you get your surplus or your deficit. You're going to be either plus or minus in that bottom section. We always want to hope for plus, but if it's negative, at least now we know. We know where we stand, and we go from there. Okay? Does that make sense? Is everybody following? I know it's a lot, but it can be daunting a little bit, but we'll work through it. We're taking the time to work through it together because you're going to spend a whole lot more time at home actually doing this. And I really hope and pray that you do. I know it seems like it's a lot of work, and it's a lot of like fishing through files and pulling up, websites and figuring this all out based on, what you're spending. But here's the thing. Once you do that and you do all that hard work, it's like done for you. And then you have actually a workable budget that you can then work from. Then it's just a matter of keeping tabs on how things are changing from there, right? But the setup of the budget, it's a lot. But please try not to be overwhelmed by that or discouraged. It is going to absolutely be worth every minute of your time. Okay, flipping the page over is a spending plan analysis. Spending plan analysis. Again, some of these I'm looking at, and some of them are redundant, to be quite honest. So I'm not sure I have to go through all of this in detail because we just did it, honestly, on the other page. Because here at the bottom, you can see that they even said items 3 through 14, which is what we just figured out, items 3 through 14 on the estimated spending plan. So this could be a double check for you. If you want to do it, go for it. But I would say if you did it and you did your due diligence the first time around, this would just be another form that you could use if you'd like. Right. That's a good point. Yep. So you see on the far right that says new monthly plan. So what they're trying to promote here, and again, they're being very particular and specific, which is good. I mean, if you need to have that to help you, then by all means use it. I guess it's going to depend on your particular situation, and if that's something you feel that will be beneficial to you, then yeah, certainly go ahead and work through that sheet and get yourself balanced out, because that's what we want to do. We want to give every penny a name. We want to know exactly where everything's going and how your money's being spent. What I really want to get to and spend a lot of our time on is this snowball strategy, because I love this. I love attacking debt. We're actually going to spend a whole session, and the session is literally called Attacking Debt. And then we're going to jump into this much more together during that session. But what I'd like you to do in the meantime, so that we're ready for when we get there, is I want you to identify all of your credit card debt, any and all credit card debt that you have, right? I want you to identify that. So you can do that. There's a debt repayment schedule on the back of this, on the back of the Snowball Strategy, that you can also use. Okay? But whatever side you want to use is fine. But what you want to do is you want to list, let's say you have a MasterCard. So you want to put that down, MasterCard. And you want to put down, what's left. What's the balance, payments left, monthly payment that if you're only paying the minimum monthly payment, then put that down if that's literally what you're paying. If you're paying more to try to get it paid off, then make sure that you make that clear. But the Snowball Strategy, does anybody know or have ever heard of the Snowball Strategy? It's been around, right? Crown actually came out with it first, and then Financial Peace University borrowed it. I don't want to say steal, but they borrowed it, right? And they've really taken it to, I think, another level that I love. I love what he has done with that. So basically what you're doing, and I'll just briefly explain it in just like 5 minutes. So Larry Burkett says he gives you the option, and we'll look into some more detail, but he gives you the option to either, yes, I am right. He gives you the option to either pay off your credit card that has the most interest, right? The most interest. You would attack that one first, then go to the next one that has the most interest and keep working through the list that way. Or you can take the one with the least amount of balance. So let's say you have a Sears Citibank credit card that has $1,000 on it, and then you have 3 other credit cards and the balance is more than $1,000. And maybe the interest is higher, maybe it's not. We don't go by the interest, we go by the balance. So he would say, if you want to pay that $1,000 one off, great. Then take that $1,000 and apply it to the next lowest one. Because that's FPU's model, Financial Peace University. That's his, he doesn't even give you the option. He's like, no, you just go after the one that has the least amount there. Because in his mind, it does 2 things. One, it psychs you out, it gets you pumped, right? Because not only have you just now paid off a credit card, but now you're able to take all of that money and put it towards something else quicker. And you're seeing satisfaction and you're seeing a return for your money quicker. So you get excited about that, and I understand how that is helpful. And 2, you're gonna get that money rolling over faster. It's going to accumulate. The snowball is going to get packed up faster if you knock the ones down with the lower amounts. Does that make sense? So there's, pick what you want to do and go with it. I prefer FPU's model just because that's what I used when I went through this, and it worked great. It's great. So Snowball Strategy works, and we're going to look at that in a couple weeks in more detail. Any thoughts or questions on debt repayment with credit cards? All right. So Financial Peace University will also be strongly encouraging you to cut up your credit card, right? He calls it plastic surgery. I haven't gone as far as that because I think there's value in having credit cards. It builds your credit, for one. If you can use it and pay back the amount when it's due in full, by all means, use a credit card. It could come back to be a great blessing for you when you need to get something with credit. Again, it depends on your particular situation. It depends on your spending habits and your discipline. If you feel like you're not disciplined enough to have a credit card, then I do agree. Cut it up. Get rid of it and use the envelope system. put your money away in cash in an envelope and use it for those particular needs that you have. Absolutely, I agree with that. So that's kind of where I stand on that. Any thoughts, questions, concerns with that? Okay. Yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Sure. Yeah. Yeah, no, that's so true. I mean, and I think we can all speak to that. We grow, right? We grow in maturity. We grow in wisdom and knowledge the older we get, hopefully. And we're no longer making the same mistakes that we once did in our earlier years where we would carry credit card debt, right? And we would spend more frivolously and be irresponsible with the money that God has given us. But we're here together working through all of this because we haven't arrived, right? We still have room to grow. We can do better, and we want to do that. We want to do better. So that's why we're here. So the next page, the percentage spending plan. This, Lisa, would be helpful for you because you were the one who wanted to know percentages. And so this actually helps you figure that out. If you, in fact, are a percentage person and need to know the percentage, that is the sheet you will want to use. And it's pretty self-explanatory. It helps you at the bottom, also gives you little tidbits on that. So there's nothing there that would be surprising to you that we haven't already talked about. All right. Next, you have a monthly spending plan A and a monthly spending plan B. Okay. Again, this can get really daunting the more that you look at these and you're like, oh man, it's another sheet to fill out and it's, this. Don't feel like you have to use all of these. I printed these out because I don't know where everyone's at. And I wanted to give you options to be able to say, this one looks like the right one for me that I want to use. So read them, study them, understand what it is that they're trying to have you do, and then follow through with those particular sheets that are going to meet you where you're at in your situation. And it's going to serve you best. Okay? And then moving on to the back of the one that says Spending Plan B, we have category page. And then we have an idea list. I mean, these are helps for you to use if you want, but they're absolutely not necessary in order to complete your budget. They're kind of just sheets that you can use to work things out, get things down for yourself, and then work it out in your budget. So we are coming up on time already. This night went fast. It is 8 o'clock. Does anybody have any thoughts on what we covered tonight? Any questions? Anything like that? Yes, Karen. Yeah, gifts. Yeah, they're actually in that one we looked at. There was a line. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's, remember earlier when I said we really have to think, like critically think, like break it down? That's one of those areas where you have to think about your family and friends. And you have to think about, I have this many grandchildren. I have this many nieces, nephews, brothers, sisters, a mom, a dad, whoever you buy for on a regular basis that you know you want to have money set aside for, that you plan to spend that money on them that month or throughout the year. What you would do is you would figure all that out and get an annual number, right, for that year, and then divide it up. So you can get a monthly, so divide that by 12 and get your monthly amount that you need to make sure you're setting aside every month. I know it sounds like a lot of work, right? But if you don't do that, then you won't know, right? You won't be ready. You won't be prepared for those times when you want to give those gifts, right? So we have to really think. We have to give it the thought that it deserves in order to get where we want to be. And it does take time. So with all that to say, I don't expect you guys to have all of this done for next week, and I know you wouldn't anyway. Even if you had the whole week to spend on it without thinking about anything else, I don't think you would do it. But here's what I would like you to do. We have, how many more weeks? About 8, 9, maybe 9 more weeks left together. I think there was 13 total or something. Okay, so we are at October 4th today. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, so I was right. 9 more weeks. Here's the challenge. I'm challenging you to be working on your budget and to have your budget as completed as you possibly can by December 6th. And then bring your budget in, right? December 6th. I will not be live streaming that day. And I will ask Jim to come back on that day to join me. And we really do feel that we want to be available for you guys, to really walk alongside you, not only that day, but moving forward to help answer any questions, to help you to succeed. And so we want to set that up with you. And so you have 9 weeks to work on your budget. We will get back together on that day. It'll be a Q&A time. And then we'll spend time actually looking specifically at your particular budget and maybe answering questions then, maybe not, maybe setting up, future appointments to meet and get together and work through some stuff. But we want to do that, and we want to see what God's going to do. So we're excited about that. So that's the challenge. Let me pray for us. Father, thank you so much for this time, again, that you've given us to be here together. And yeah, Lord, we do. We covered a lot of material tonight, and a lot of it was redundant. And it seemed, like we kind of went in circles sometimes. But Lord, I think it's good. Repetition is good. And I think we have a pretty firm foundation on where it is we want to go. So Lord, I pray for everybody here that you'd be with them in ways that are encouraging and fruitful. And I pray that they would spend time really thinking hard about how to create and craft their budget, a budget that will work for their particular situations. So, Lord, we thank you for how you continue to provide for us. And we do. Ultimately, in the end, we want this all to bring glory to you. This isn't all about us, but it is about you and your kingdom purposes and how we can get in a financial situation where we can give to your purposes more and be a part of what it is that you are at work doing in this world. We thank you that we are a small part of that work. And we pray all this in Jesus' name. Amen.